The rain had just stopped when Nkem stepped onto the marble foyer of the Uche family mansion, her small suitcase clutched like a lifeline. She had been a village girl all her life, the daughter of a school teacher, the one who spent evenings helping her mother mend clothes and mornings tutoring younger kids. She had never imagined that a scholarship to study business in Lagos would land her here, at the center of a family that saw her less as a bride and more as a project. The wedding had been quiet, a private affair arranged with Uche in the middle of a corporate merger. He was handsome in that polished, corporate way, tall, well-dressed, courteous in a way that felt rehearsed. He had told her, with an earnestness she wanted to believe, that she was different, that he saw her realness. His family's approval, apparently, was not required, or so she thought. Mema Uche's eyes skimmed over her as if measuring defects. The house staff, trained to recognize only the family's rhythm, regarded her with polite distance. The driver opened the door for her with mechanical courtesy. The butler nodded once, unreadable. Uche guided her gently through the hallway, his hand briefly resting on her lower back. "Welcome home," he said, voice soft. It was the only warmth she had felt all day. She smiled, letting the relief flood in. "Thank you, Uche." They entered the den. The room smelled faintly of expensive incense and old money. Portraits of stern ancestors in dark frames looked down from the walls. A crystal decanter gleamed on the side table, untouched. Uche's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression unreadable. "Later," he murmured, putting the phone away. "Let me show you the guest suite." The guest suite had been prepared with care, silk sheets, soft lighting, a wardrobe with clothes that were clearly designer, but the label on the pillow read, "Temporary." Nkem paused, remembering the tiny note that came with the wedding gift from Mama Uche. "We hope she settles in quickly. We'll all feel better once she understands her place." She crumpled it quietly into her palm and let it fall into the laundry basket. That evening, the family gathered for dinner in the grand dining room. Nkem had been told not to be too forward, to blend. She had worn a modest dress, nothing flashy, her hair in neat braids. Uche sat next to her, making small talk, while Mama Uche presided like a queen. "So, Nkem," Mama Uche began, sharpness folded into silk. "Tell us about the village. I hope the boys there don't mind that one of their own is living in a mansion now." Nkem offered a polite smile. "Our village has a strong sense of community, Ma. I grew up learning to work hard and respect people. Lagos has been a big step, but I'm excited to learn." Kayoma, Uche's sister, a statuesque woman with a smile that never touched her eyes, tilted her head. "So you studied business, in the village?" Her laughter folded into the air like a knife. Uche's gaze flicked to his sister, then to Nkem. "Kayoma, that's not Faye." "Faye." Kayoma's eyebrows arched. "We all know what seats get given, Uche. The family is generous. It's just nice to see them take their time picking a project." Nkem's throat tightened. She forced a laugh. "I'm here to be family." The words hung, thin, in a room that had already defined her as anything but. Later, when she and Uche went upstairs, she finally surrendered the composure she'd been holding together. "Did you hear them?" she whispered. Uche rubbed his temple. "They're used to having control. Give it time, Nkem. I'll talk to my mother." "Talk to her." Her voice cracked. "Uche, they called me a charity case, at dinner, in front of everyone. They compared my school to a village hobby." "I know. I'll handle it. Just sleep. Tomorrow is a new day." Nkem lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The chandelier spilled soft light over a room she was supposed to call home. Her reflection in the wardrobe mirror looked foreign. Wide eyes, tight smile, a quiet fear behind her courage. In the distance, through the large glass window, the city buzzed, Lagos, bright and indifferent. She whispered to herself, "I came here to build something. If they think I'm a project, I'll become the one writing their endgame." Mama Uche was not a woman who spoke without intent. Her words always carried weight, even if it came coated in silk and veiled politeness. She called Uche into her private study, a room lined with leather-bound books and framed degrees from universities no one even attempted to question. There was a mood in the air, cool, measured. "You husband her," she began, turning a page without looking up. "But understand something, Uche. That girl doesn't come from the same fabric. Don't let her get too comfortable. She's not one of us. If she starts thinking she is, that's when problems start." Uche's jaw tightened. "Mother, she's my wife. She deserves respect. I promised her a life, not a chessboard where she's a pawn." Mama Uche finally looked up. Her eyes were sharp, unblinking. "Respect is earned, son. And comfort is a luxury only the family can afford. Watch her. Don't let her make the mansion hers. We've seen too many foolish stories about outsiders growing bold because someone gave them a title. Keep her soft. Keep her grateful." Uche leaned in. "You're talking about her like she's a risk. She's not a project to be managed." She stood gracefully. "All I'm saying is, don't let her think she's above the hierarchy. If she starts asking too many questions, start reminding her who brought her here." He left, frustration carved into his face. Mama Uche sipped her tea and picked up the phone. A soft voice on the other end confirmed things. "Yes, Kayoma's acting class is on. Make sure the fake pregnancy story is seeded. We need the narrative ready if Nkem starts getting comfortable." On the other side of the city, Kayoma smirked as she rehearsed her lines in front of a mirror, holding a pregnancy test box like a prop. "Chaos is a story, and I'm the author," she thought. That evening, Nkem came downstairs to find Uche's mother waiting in the parlor, a delicate porcelain cup in hand. The conversation began light, then turned. "You're doing well, Nkem," Mama Uche said. "Adjusting to city life is not easy for someone from the provinces." "I'm learning fast, Ma," Nkem replied, voice steady. "You know," Mama Uche continued, "we all have roles in this family. Your role isn't to be loud. It's to listen. The more you try to make the mansion yours, the more you'll stir shadows." She leaned in slightly. "Comfort is dangerous. Some women become entitled. Don't let that be you." Nkem swallowed. "I only want peace for us, Ma. I want to help Uche, help this family." Mama Uche's smile was thin. "Help in ways that don't cause ripples. Be grateful for what was given, and you'll be safe. Ambition is a fire. It can warm you, or burn the foundation others built." When she left, Uche found Nkem in the library, flipping through a book about corporate mergers, something she'd picked up trying to understand his world better. "You okay?" he asked. She closed the book. "Your mother told me to not get too comfortable." He exhaled. "She's afraid of losing control." "I'm not trying to take anything," Nkem said quietly. "I just want to belong. But they keep giving me goals to achieve to earn that belonging, like I'm on probation." "I'll make it right," he promised again. "I'll talk to her." In the kitchen, Kayoma listened from behind the pantry door, her lips curled in satisfaction. She tapped a message, Phase 1 initiated. Nkem stays unsteady. Prepare the next act. The morning sunlight broke into the mansion's breakfast room, glittering off crystal and silverware. Nkem arrived early, hoping that by being prepared she could counter any stares. She believed small gestures would soften the edges. She had made a light jollof rice with herbs she remembered from home, hoping to surprise the family, and maybe earn a nod. She set the dish gently on the sideboard. Uche joined her, pulling her quietly to the side. "Don't try too hard," he murmured. "They'll twist it. Just be yourself." "I'll be myself," she whispered back. "I'm tired of being careful. I want to be real." Kayoma swept in, a designer robe trailing behind her. "What's that smell?" Trying to turn breakfast into a village feast. Her laugh was loud, and the other sisters-in-law, distant cousins, all glanced over. Mima Uche entered with a slight rustle of silk. Ah, Nkem, you up early. It's admirable, really. She sat, fixing her eyes on the plate. What is this supposed to be? Jollof rice, Nkem said, offering a bowl with a smile. It's a family recipe from home. I thought. From home? Kyoma interrupted. How quaint. Does the village have a word for seasoning, or do you just pray the rice tastes good? Uche's face tightened. Kyoma, stop it. Kyoma leaned forward, eyes glittering. Oh, I'm just curious how someone who can't even order in proper English wants to cook for those of us who know class. She glanced at Nkem's accent, her clothes, the way she held the spoon. It's like a reality show audition. Poor girl tries to be rich. A hush fell. Even the help in the kitchen froze mid-gesture, listening. Nkem placed the bowl down, her smile stiff. I didn't mean disrespect. This is a recipe my mother taught me. Of course she did, Mama Uche said coolly. And I'm sure your mother is proud you can make breakfast in our house. Just remember, the family table isn't the village square. There are rules. You may not see them yet, but you'll learn. She picked up her fork delicately. Let's try it. Kyoma's hand fluttered over the bowl. You know what would be even better, Nkem? If you paired that with a translation course. Perhaps then you could explain your background to people who understand the difference between village charm and appropriation. Uche shot a look. Kyoma. She shrugged. I'm only helping her upgrade her vocabulary. Nkem's fork trembled. She raised it, held herself together, and took a single bite. The spice burst warm and familiar in her mouth, comfort from a past life. No one complimented it. Instead, a cousin whispered to another, she thinks she's clever. After breakfast, Nkem retreated to the nicer-like veranda, where the air had a scent of cut grass and expensive flowers. She took out a small notebook, scribbling things she could do more research, learn their etiquette, learn what they value. Maybe if I understand the language of their power, I can survive it. Uche sat beside her, quiet. You didn't deserve that. I know, she said. It's fine. I've been cold worse. I just thought a little warmth might help. They threw cold instead. He was silent for a long time. Then, a decision. I'm meeting my mother. Tonight. I'm telling her she needs to stop. No more jabs. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Don't fight their war with anger. Fight it with strategy. Learn every move. Then make yours. He kissed her forehead. You always know what to do. Kyoma had always understood that stories could shift perception, and in the world the Uche family lived in, reputation was narrative. If Nkem was becoming a discomfort, if she was beginning to become real, then the story had to change the center of attention. She had rehearsed this plot in her head for days, subtle, sympathetic, directed. She went to the family's private physician under the pretense of a routine checkup. The doctor was a quiet man, loyal to the family, and well aware of the currents beneath the polished surface. I need a favor, Kyoma said, voice low. Prepare something. A false positive. I need everyone looking toward me, concerned. I want the family murmuring about miracle child and sympathy pouring out. Then, when Nkem doesn't get pregnant soon, they'll link the blessing to the barren threat. You know how easily whispers become judgment. The doctor hesitated. That's unethical. You're essentially using biology as a story prop. Kyoma smiled. I see. And what does ethics mean when legacy is at risk? I'm protecting our line. This isn't against her. It's a preemptive shield. If she starts gaining momentum, people will question the purity of the bloodline. If I gain sympathy now, I control the narrative. He relented. Fine. I'll set something up. A test. A blood marker. People will see what they want to see. When the pregnancy news spread, the mansion did what it did best. It rallied. The family quietly praised Kyoma, offering to organize a small brunch to celebrate the new life that would secure the lineage. Mama Uche called it a blessing. Uche offered a polite, distant smile. Nkem watched from a distance as the family fussed over Kayoma. The way they touched her arm, the soft voices, they treated her like a fragile treasure. Nkem felt something twist in her stomach. Is something wrong? Uche asked. Just observing, she replied. They're celebrating something I can't even ask about without being seen as jealous. He squeezed her hand. They're playing their old games. Don't let it bother you. Kayoma, meanwhile, began to plant seeds in conversation. At lunch. You know, one of the hardest things about being a woman in this family is the pressure. People assume fertility defines worth. I'm just grateful Nkem understands that challenge. She's been strong. Her tone made it sound like empathy while baiting a comparison. Later, in private, Kayoma spoke with Mama Uche. We have the sympathy engine humming. Now we wait for the main event. Once Nkem doesn't get pregnant quickly, everyone will speculate. Who wants the heir? Who is barren? The whispers will do the work. She'll be the one on defense, again. Mama Uche nodded slowly. Let the city talk. We'll be the ones quietly shaping its gossip. Nkem's cycle shrank. She felt like a character in someone else's drama, reacting to events she didn't write. But the twist was that she was taking notes. Every rumor, every staged moment, every look of pity catalogued like a blueprint. That night, alone, she opened the laptop and typed, Lesson, narratives are weapons. They cut when held by others. I will learn to write mine. Mama Uche's wedding anniversary was the kind of event that served as a public display of heritage. Chandeliers shimmered like constellations, the guests were draped in designer fabrics, and the invitation list read like a who's who of Lagos elite. The family was in full regalia. Nkem stood by the doorway, her dress subtle but elegant, her expression tight with nerves. You'll be fine, Uche whispered, adjusting her necklace. Remember, they are watching, but you're not the one on stage. Just breathe. Her hands trembled slightly as she was handed a tray of canapes. I'm only helping, she murmured. The plan had been clear. Nkem would serve at the beginning, a gesture of familial unity. A picture-perfect moment for the cameras to show humble bride embracing tradition. What nobody told her was how that humility would be weaponized. The event started. Toasts were made about legacy, about strength in family, about resilience. Kayoma gave a speech dripping with performative emotion about how the family overcame doubt. Cameras flashed. Then came the part when Nkem was asked to step forward. Since we're celebrating unity, Mama Uche announced, we thought it'd be meaningful for Nkem to serve our honored guests. After all, she knows what it's like to serve, so she understands the family's foundation. The audience chuckled. Some of the younger relatives exchanged glances. Uche's jaw tightened. Nkem grabbed the tray, forced a polite smile, and moved through the crowd, placing canapes with precision. She heard comments as she passed. Look how humble she is. So sweet of her to serve. She's practically one of the staff. A guest, an old business associate of Uche's father, leaned in and said, You're serving at your own anniversary party? That's unusual. Most wives of good standing don't do this. Nkem nearly dropped the tray. It's an honor, she managed. Her smile flaked, replaced by a quiet suffocation. Kayoma, backstage, whispered to a cousin, See? She's playing the part so well. The cameras will eat this up. They'll say the poor girl is grateful she's allowed to be here. It's perfect. The footage hit social media in minutes. Bride serves at her in-law's anniversary like a maid, humble or humiliating. Comments poured in, some sympathetic, some mocking. The narrative seed sprouted. She's a charity case. She's too submissive. She doesn't know her place. Uche watched from the side, rage flickering in his eyes, but he said nothing. Nkem finished her round, placed the empty tray down, and retreated to a corner. Her cheeks burned, not just from embarrassment, but because she saw the way the family drank the narrative like wine. Later, when the party waned, Uche joined her. "Why didn't you say something? You didn't have to do that." "I didn't want a scene," she said. "They would have turned it into something worse. If I refused, they'd call me ungrateful. If I accepted, they used it as proof I belonged to the lower tier." He looked at her. "This is not over." She gave a half smile. "It's only beginning. They're showing their cards. I'm learning theirs." That night, in her room, she replayed videos of the party. She rewound the moment her hands trembled for a second, then steadied. She watched how the audience's expressions shifted based on the frame. She added to her notebook, used their spectacle, tying their humiliation into curiosity. People love underdogs. They also love revenge. Make them want to know what happens next. The morning after the anniversary party, the mansion felt colder, as if the walls had absorbed the humiliation and were relishing in it. Nkem moved through the day with the calm of someone cataloging evidence. Uche's silence weighed heavier than any accusation. His distance felt like a wall she didn't know how to scale. That afternoon, Uche's father called a family meeting. The phrasing was gentle, but the undertone was a summons. Uche hesitated, then went. Nkem waited with an unease that had become familiar. He returned with eyes that couldn't hide the damage. "They want us to formalize things," he said slowly, sitting across from her. "They think it's best for the family's image if we separate officially." "What?" Her voice cracked, disbelief layering over pain. "On what grounds? You're married to me." "They're saying it's enough," he whispered. "That I've been foolish. That she doesn't fit." Those were their exact words. He put his palm over his face. "They've already drafted the papers. They said it would be easier if I signed before things got messy. For the family's reputation. They said it's what's best for me." She stayed at him, waiting for the fight. He gave none. "You can fight," she said quietly. "You can tell them no. They can't force you to sign." He looked up, eyes hollowing. "They can make life impossible. They can cut me off. They can ruin the deals I've been building. They've already started whispering to the board about stability, about appearances." His throat tightened. "They said if I don't do it, they'll paint me as ungrateful, unstable. That will ruin more than this marriage. I can't lose everything. Nkem. I can't lose the family name, the company, the foundation. We built nothing yet. I have to survive." "So their cruelty is the price?" she asked. "Your silence is the currency." He swallowed. "I'm trying to protect us. If I push back, they'll take everything. They will take you and me, both. If I sign quietly, maybe we rebuild later. I'm choosing stability over chaos. You're choosing them over me." It wasn't a question. He closed his eyes. "I didn't want it to be like this." "You didn't want it to be like this," she echoed, voice brittle. "But it is. So what now? Do I pack my things and leave because everyone else decided I don't belong?" He reached for her hand. "I can't lose you." "You already did," she said, pulling away before his fingers touched hers. "Because love isn't the same as surrender." That night, the divorce papers appeared on her dressing table, immaculate, with a fountain pen laid as if an invitation. Uche left a note. "Sign. I'll explain later." She sat in the suite, the words of the family echoing around her. Chair to case, someone to be managed, a temporary fixture. The ink on the paper felt like a trap. She picked up the pen, held it near her thumb. The letters blurred. She closed the document and slid it into the drawer. She would not be the hurried footnote. If this was a choice between her dignity and a paper, she'd rather reclaim her name without their approval. She walked downstairs. Mama Uche sat in the parlor, fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. "You made the right choice," Mama Uche said gently, as if she were offering consolation. "A clean separation is dignified. You don't want scandal." "This isn't about dignity," Nkem replied. This is about someone choosing his family over his wife because the family threatened to erase him. You scripted the ending, and Uche swallowed it whole. Mima Uche's smile didn't waver. He's doing what's practical. Smart men protect legacy. You should understand that. It's not personal. It's preserving structure. Structure built on cruelty isn't worth protecting, Nkem said, stepping back. I'm leaving. Where will you go? Mema Uche asked, innocently. Anywhere but here, Nkem said, and she walked away. That evening, as the mansion slept under its facade of control, Kayama sent a voice note to a cousin. Phase 2. Pressure dislodged. Uche signed. I will. The audience loves a quiet breakup. Sympathy will be split. Keep high unmoored. The narrative is shifting. Nkem sat in the dark, the divorce papers still in the drawer, her mind pulling threads. She had lost the man she trusted to the web of the family, but what they thought was a defeat was a recalibration. Her notebook now held a new line. When they give you a false choice, choose yourself. Don't fight their war on their terms. Build a war they can't imagine losing. The storm came as if the sky had been waiting for the family's hypocrisy to break. Rain battered the compound, loud and unforgiving. It was the kind of night when even the guards, who had learned to look away from family matters, kept their heads down. Nkem was asleep when the banging on her door started. She opened it to find 2 burly security officers from the estate, shadowed in the light from the hallway. You have to leave, one said, voice professional but cold. Mrs. Uche's presence here is no longer required. You've been given notice. The family wants no scene. Notice? For what? I'm still married to Uche. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from the raw sting of betrayal. They said the divorce is finalized, the other officer said. You have 20 minutes. Take what's yours. We've been instructed not to help beyond that. She looked toward the bedroom. Her few belongings were packed into one suitcase already, the rest shoved into corners after the subtle suggestions from staff earlier that week. She grabbed the suitcase, wrapped in a raincoat, and stepped outside. The rain cut through her clothes like knives. She was barefoot. Someone had taken her shoes, accidentally misplaced during the morning's household reorganization. She staggered, the mud swallowing her feet, as the security team pushed her toward the gate. Uche appeared, soaked, running from inside. Nkem, stop! His voice was raw. This isn't how. He was blocked by his mother, arms out like a shield. Let her go, Uche. You signed. That's final. Mother, this is wrong, he yelled. The rain masked his voice but didn't soften it. She turned to Nkem. I'm sorry you had to see this, she said, voice low, eyes flickering with something that might have been regret or calculation. Don't touch me. The words were quiet. She stepped past Uche, who reached out and grabbed her arm. Please, just stay. We can fix this. I can tell them. He was cut off by a cold look from Mama Uche. You did what you had to. Let her go. They shoved her into the waiting car of the mysterious man who had once given her an umbrella, the same barrister Kenneth from the Whispers, the man who had shown up hours earlier at her door claiming he had a few questions about the late Mr. Okonkwo's estate. He had seemed like an enigma. Now, his car was the only dry place she could go. She sat in the back, trembling, soaked through, dripping onto the leather seat. Kenneth didn't speak. He handed her a thick blanket. His eyes were sympathetic, but distant. You don't have to say anything, he said. They think they are throwing you away. They've just made their biggest mistake. She stared at him. Who are you? I'm the executor, he answered. And I think it's time the people who built empires started knowing what happens when those they discard rise with ownership papers in hand. He drove. The rain blurred the city lights into streaming gold. She watched the mansion fade behind them, a monolith that had just expelled her like trash. Her suitcase sat beside her, soaked and smelling like wet fabric, but her spirit, though battered, did not break. The notebook inside it, the one with the lines forged in rage and learning, was dry. She pulled it out, opened to the last entry, and wrote in shaky ink, thrown out like trash. They underestimated the kind of fire people who've lost everything carry. Kenneth's office was a modest space for a man dealing with fortunes, books, records, a low hum of quiet efficiency. He made tea with a ritual that seemed old and grounding. "You've been watching for a while," Nkem said, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. The teacup warmed her fingers. "Why help me? Why not just watch them break me and walk away like everyone else?" He slid the file toward her. Inside were letters, documents, and photos, some faint, some vibrant, about a man named Okonkwo, a name she had heard whispered in her childhood but never connected to anything real. "They were looking for you," Kenneth said. "Your grandfather, the one they claimed was a myth, spent years trying to find his blood. He kept records. He had stipulations. No one knew you existed. Then he became sick. The people managing his legacy started writing you off as a rumor. I didn't. I followed the trail." She flipped through a faded photograph of a stained man with soft eyes, standing beside a small clinic in the village. The woman beside him, her grandmother, smiling like she owned the world. "He kept me." Her voice broke. Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because secrets protect people in power," Kenneth replied. He wanted a quiet discovery. He didn't know someone would make it loud for him. But here we are. She leaned back. "So I'm the heir?" "You're the only heir," he confirmed. "He left everything to you. They are lawyers who didn't want the papers validated. People who thought the old man would leave it to the foundation or a relative with less fire. He wanted you. He left instructions. No one could claim it without the proper identity verification. I've been waiting for your moment." She rubbed her temples. "They threw me out in the rain like I was nothing. And now, they're going to watch me walk back in with their own house in my name." Kenneth's lips twisted in a faint smile. "They think they've written the chapter where you're gone. You're not gone. You've just been unboxed. Now you decide the rest of the story." She held the umbrella he offered, figuratively, for the first time not from a stranger but from legacy. She whispered, "I don't want revenge. I want what's owed. I want the power to make sure they never forget what they did." "You'll get that," he said. "But it's more satisfying when they see the rise first, when the world applauds the woman they discarded. They will question everything. Let them. The higher they climb back to their own ruin, the louder your name will echo." She nodded. "Then let's begin." She closed the file and put it in her bag. "Start the validation. I want the verification done. I want the letters. I want the world to know I didn't come from nothing. I came from a bloodline they tried to erase." Kenneth tapped a pen. "We'll do it quietly at first. Then let the publicity do the rest. They are already vulnerable. Uche's name is bruised. The flagship property is in flux. The timing is perfect. You'll be silent until the moment you step out. Then you'll stop the auction themselves." Nkem smiled, not with softness, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had been overlooked for too long. "Make sure they know the keys belong to me." The next few days blurred into meticulous preparation. Kenneth guided her through documents, old correspondences, DNA verifications, and legal formalities. That which was once whispered as myth unfolded like a well-preserved manuscript. The mansion staff began to hear the rumblings. Word got to the Uche family, not through their own channels, but through the kind of quiet gossip that creeps in from other estates, from legal filings, from people outside their bubble. Rumors, at first dismissed, strengthened with proof. A woman they had humiliated was not only alive, she was being declared heir to a vast fortune. In the quiet of a hotel room, Nkem reviewed the biography Kenneth had compiled. Her grandfather had been a visionary, a man who built a healthcare network that reached rural villages, who funded schools, and who quietly sponsored promising students without seeking credit. There were letters he wrote to her grandmother, an ache for family, a wish that his bloodline would one day be a force for healing. She found in one letter a line underlined in his own hand. If she comes, let her not be broken by their assumptions. She is strength wrapped quietly. She pressed her thumb against the fading ink. In that moment she understood. He'd seen the weight the world placed on those like her. He had predicted her resilience and had bet his legacy on it. She stood at the balcony of her temporary suite, watching the Lagos skyline, and whispered, "I will be more than their story. I will be their reckoning." Kenneth walked in with a folder. "Your identification has been confirmed. The inheritance proceedings are underway. There's one more piece. Your grandfather left a clause. It's not just the assets. He wanted you to have the ability to do something with them. The mansion isn't just a house. He wrote that whoever owns it must lead the initiative on legacy restoration. That phrase is broad. He left it to you to define." She looked at the clause. Legacy restoration. "He trusted you to decide what that means," he said. She looked out again at the city, lights flickering like possibilities. "He wanted me to turn their cruelty into shelter, their shame into empowerment. I'll do more than own. I'll restructure what they called legacy." He nodded. "The world is listening. You want to strike. Do it with intention." The first notice came like an echo from the past. The mansion, her ex-in-law's central property, was up for a sealed auction due to a technical default from some legal entanglement the family was already struggling to navigate. The irony was thick. They believed that panic was the result of external pressure. They didn't know the pressure was about to fold inward. The auction date was set. Invitations went to select bidders. Nkem didn't announce herself. She didn't need the spectacle yet. She moved in controlled silence. Kenneth arranged an anonymous bid through a shell that, on paper, was just another investor. Behind it was identity verification, proof of funds, and a legal mechanism that would unmask the real owner only if she chose to reveal herself. Mama Uche received the auction notice with a dismissive scoff. "They are overreacting. This is a temporary hiccup. The house is ours. No one will outbid us." Kyoma posted, subtly, a social media story captioned, "When the foundation shakes, only the strong survive. #family first." The family interpreted it as confidence. The city interpreted it as weakness. On the day of the auction, the grand hall was tense. Potential buyers observed the family's tight smiles. Uche looked worn, the weight of his choices becoming heavier. He noticed a woman in the back, unknown, dignified in a way that wasn't loud. He didn't realize she had been watching, how identity wrapped behind layers, studying each flicker of insecurity. When the final bid came in, it was silent, efficient, undeniable. The mansion, the symbol they used to build their hierarchy, went to the anonymous investor. The family assumed it was a hedge fund, someone with influence. They were gutted, but their pride demanded poise. A week later, at a calculated moment, Nkem stepped out of a sleek black Range Rover in front of the mansion. The security guards, who once pushed her out, stood frozen. She wore a tailored power suit, heels that clicked with a rhythm she had given meaning. Her skin glowed, not because of luxury, but because of certainty. The driver held the deed as if presenting a crown. She walked toward the front, soft applause breaking as photographers, pre-informed by Kenneth's network, captured the moment. Uche was pulled outside by a cousin for explanation. He watched in silence as she approached. Mama Uche emerged, cane in hand, eyes wide, not with shock, but with the cold realization that the script had been rewritten. Nkem opened her bag, pulled out the deed, and flipped it gently to the front. "I just came to see my property," she said, voice calm. "I thought it was only right to visit the place that's been on everyone's mind lately." Silence roared. Her presence wasn't dramatic. It was inevitable. Kayoma's smile froze. Uche's face paled. The mansion that had been a symbol of their power now had a new owner, one they had broken, humiliated, and abandoned. She turned to Uche. "You chose them over me. I chose myself. That's the difference." The cameras didn't need words. The headlines would write themselves. In the quiet after the brief encounter, she walked through the property, her heels echoing on the marble steps she had once been dragged from in the rain. Later, when the video went viral, people would replay the moment, the way she held herself, the way the family reacted, the gravity of her calm. The narrative shifted, not with fury, but with ironclad ownership. She opened her notebook, adding a new line, in precise handwriting. Ownership is not given. It's reclaimed. And sometimes, the people who threw you out end up watching you move in with the keys in your hand. The world had shifted under Nkem's feet, but she didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. Instead, she disappeared. Not into hiding, into refinement. The morning after she claimed the mansion, speculation roared across social feeds, breakfast shows, and whispered boardroom hallways. Some called it poetic justice. Others called it a fluke. The family, bruised and scrambling, tried tightly to stitch their image back together. Uche retreated deeper into silence, his pride eroding into shame. Kayoma's public confidence began to crack beneath the pressure of being associated with the now-ousted family. Nkem, however, did something unexpected. She went quiet. She hired tutors on communication, high-level negotiation, media training. She hired a stylist who didn't dress her in flashy clothes, but in silhouettes that carried authority without screaming for attention. She practiced speech cadence in front of mirrors, studied the language of power and empathy, and she shut off every voice that wanted her to burn the mansion down in rage. Rage was fire, strategy was fertilizer. The difference was the harvest. Uche's old social circles tried to reach her. Callers left messages that sounded like apologies wrapped in confusion. "We miss who you were," one said. "You've changed," another whispered, hoping change meant vulnerability. She didn't answer. Silence was her signal. She wasn't reactive. She was preparing. In the city, whispers started. Who is she? Really? What's her next move? The girl they threw out now owns the house. People began to talk about her in the same breath. They talked about legacy, resilience, and inevitability. Mama Uche invited her to lunch, an offer that smelled like a test. Nkem accepted, not in the family's dining room, but at a neutral restaurant, a minimalist space where nothing could be staged easily. They sat across from each other. Mama Uche's smile was practiced. "You've done well," she said, voice even. "You didn't scream. You didn't beg. You took." Nkem stirred her tea slowly. "You offered me the script. I rewrote it." "You could have destroyed the family," Mama Uche continued. "You could have turned this into spectacle." "I chose to change the definition of power," Nkem replied. "Breaking something is easy. Building something lasting, that takes patience." Mama Uche leaned forward. "You've become dangerous, Nkem. Not because of what you have, but because of what you've learned. Quiet women, when they carry storms, are the ones who drown empires." "Danger is in perspective," Nkem said lightly. "To some, I'm a threat. To others, a hope. I'm just a woman taking what was always owed to her bloodline, on her terms." The lunch ended with niceties, but beneath it was an unspoken acknowledgement. The old hierarchy was eroding. Nkem didn't announce her next move. She didn't have to. The city's curiosity was her amplifier. A soft leak here, a controlled whisper there, and the story circulated like perfume, subtle, lingering, and intoxicating. Her notebook, dug-eared now with the weight of strategy, had a new heading: Phase, Build. Under it, bullet points: Reclaim narrative, Establish brand, Protect self, Empower others. She circled the last point twice. The eviction of her ex-in-laws from their own home had left a vacuum filled with murmurs of instability. Nkem used that ripple as a current, steering it toward a bigger tide. The family's other properties were tangled in legal and financial knots. Subtle mismanagement, public pressure, and the exposure of their vulnerability created a cascading effect. When a formal notice arrived at the Uche family's copper headquarters, it landed like a gauntlet. The notice was not about the mansion they had already lost. It was about a cornerstone property used as collateral for multiple investments. A technical default triggered a forced sale through auction. The papers were clinical, devoid of empathy, and blunt in their consequence. Failure to rectify will result in seizure. The deadline imposed a week's frenzy. Kyoma tried to spin confidence on live interviews. "The family is weathering a temporary storm," she declared sharply, her voice carrying just enough assurance to mask desperation. Uche stopped attending public events. Mama Uche, pale under her makeup, convened internal meetings that turned into finger-pointed blame games. Nkem watched from the outside, from a curated distance. Kenneth's network ensured she had the earliest access to the auction details. She didn't need to jump in publicly. Instead, she prepared subtle leverage moves, alerting sympathetic journalists to the broader context of the family's downfall, planting human interest narratives about legacy, and profiling herself as a steward of heritage, not a victim gloating on ruins. She released a carefully worded op-ed, anonymously circulated at first, about what legacy should mean. Not the preservation of an ego, but the restitution of dignity to those who built it. It went viral in niche circles before spreading wider. People began questioning how family power had been built, and whether the system that elevated some while crushing others was sustainable. Inside the mansion, the family was increasingly paranoid. Mama Uche demanded answers from lawyers. Kyoma lashed out at anyone who questioned her public narrative. Uche's silence was now louder than his voice ever had been. The auction, set to be public and high-profile, had become their new Achilles' heel. Nkem leaned in. She authorized a bid, not overtly from her, but through a trust-based entity structured to appear as a philanthropic investment group interested in preserving historical estates. The bid wasn't just about acquisition. It was a message: your empire's pillars are not immune. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to reconstruct the meaning of ownership. The family received the second notice. The auction would proceed as scheduled. Panic was no longer private. It was displayed on their faces. "What are we going to do?" Uche asked, the vulnerability in his voice a contrast to the years of performance. "Do what we've always done," Mama Uche replied sharply. "Control the narrative. Make this look like a temporary hiccup. No one should know you're scrambling." But the world had already noticed the scramble. Investors began pulling back. The auction loomed. On the day the eviction orders were served, the sun seemed cruelly bright, as if illuminating the unraveling. The family watched the officials walk through the compound, neutral faces, legal papers in hand. The media had started circling on tip-offs. The story wasn't just property loss anymore. It was the collapse of a carefully curated legacy. They were kicked out of the secondary estate, the one they'd used to host the philanthropic events and hide financial missteps. The family's pride, once a wall, now cracked and crumbled under public scrutiny. Social media feeds were filled with shots of security personnel changing locks, of boxes being carried out in silence, of Mama Uche's stoic expression turning into something tight and controlled. Uche's father, previously the silent anchor, watched in stunned silence. Kyoma screamed at the lawyers, blaming anyone but the obvious mismanagement, while the cousins tried to spin it with exaggerated calm. The society circles that had once invited them now whispered, some out of pity, most out of distance. Nkem stood across the street, watching. She didn't need to be seen. The cameras caught her not as a dramatic intruder, but as a quiet observer, well-dressed, composed. She had reservations, but she didn't look like someone who was gloating. She had written a piece about what dignity looked like amid collapse. It trended. She was the contrast to the spectacle of the family's downfall. Uche came outside, eyes hollow. "You could have stopped this. You still can help." She leaned against the car, cold breeze lifting her scarf slightly. "I didn't create their undoing. They created it themselves. I made a choice years ago not to fight with their weapons, but to build a place where their old tools are obsolete. Why not help? Why not?" Because helping would put me back in their story, she interrupted. I am writing mine. They are watching me breathe and trying to find their own oxygen in the chaos they made. Mama Uche was furious. She sent for Nkem, not in public, but through a discreet message. Meet me. One last chance to quiet this. I can make this easier for you. Nkem agreed. This time the location was symbolic. The same venue where her transformation began, a modest conference room owned by a third party with no ties to the family. Mama Uche arrived with a facade of calm. We can still come together, she began. You could drop the other properties. We could make a joint foundation, present it like reconciliation. You'd be seen as merciful. We'd be seen as transformed. Nkem looked at her steadily. You want me to dress your collapse as charity for you. That isn't reconciliation. That's a cover-up. The public is watching, Mama Uche pressed. You can control what they see. I'm not controlling anything, Nkem said. You lost your foundation because you built it on shame. I'm building mine on making sure the shame doesn't recycle itself. I'll give back to women you discarded. I won't patch your ruin. Mama Uche left with her offer hanging like a bad aftertaste. In the car, she whispered. She's dangerous. Quiet, unstoppable. We underestimated her. Kyoma responded. She's just the beginning. The next stage is damage control. We get ahead, or we become the cautionary tale. Nkem returned to her desk, writing. Eviction is theatrics. The real collapse is internal. When they're looking outward, build inward. The gap between who they were and who they are is the highway for those they pushed out. There was a surreal stillness when Nkem returned to the mansion, not as the stormed-out woman of the past, but as a composed owner. The guards who had once dragged her out in the rain now stood at attention, uncertain how to address her. The house that had felt like a cage now opened to her, its keys in her hand, its corridors hers to walk deliberately. She didn't come with a spectacle. There was no dramatic speech. She stepped out of the car with a small entourage, legal aides, a few journalists invited quietly, and Kenneth at her side. The cameras, primed by controlled leaks, captured the moment anyway. The family watched from the upper balcony, their faces a mix of fury, disbelief, and the beginning of forced respect. She entered through the main door, the same path that had once been paved with derision. The foyer now felt like a stage where the audience had to adjust their seats. She didn't speak to Uche when she saw him. She didn't need to. She walked through, letting the place breathe her presence. The house, so long a symbol of exclusion, echoed with her heels, sound that spelled ownership. A young housemaid, who had once avoided her glance in the hallway, now bowed slightly, eyes wide. Madam, she whispered, uncertain. Call me Nkem, she replied, soft but assertive, and have the family meeting room prepared. I'd like to invite them to a conversation. Her tone wasn't cruel. It was final. The family was summoned. Mama Uche arrived with her usual retinue, the forced calm replaced with brittle politeness. Kyoma tried to smile, but her eyes darted like someone in a glass cage watching a rising tide. Nkem stood at the center of the room. This house has seen many versions of power, she began. Today it simply sees a new stewardship. You were invited here not for apologies, but to witness accountability. Uche opened his mouth, then closed it. He had nothing to offer that would undo the choice he made. The others murmured, searching for an angle. I just wanted to see my property, she continued, voice steady, to understand the space that was used to belittle me, and to begin the work it was always meant for. She slid the deed across the table so it gleamed like a truth. You were given your roles. I was given mine. I chose to no longer be a character in your play. I am the writer of my own act now. Silence settled. Kyoma's lips pressed taut. Mema Uche's calculated expression cracked. Just a hair, showing the beginning of a shift from control to calculation. The cameras didn't need captions. The world saw the power dynamics laid bare. The mansion's name was no longer just associated with the family. It was now attached to her narrative. The headlines would call it the woman who walked back in. She left the room. Before she stepped out, she turned slightly. You had the chance to build something together. Instead, you chose exclusion, control, and humiliation. I chose empowerment, ownership, and legacy. That's the difference. She didn't wait for a response. She walked out, the click of her heels a metronome marking a new era. The video hit the internet like a ripple turning into a wave. Clips of Nkem walking into the mansion, of her placing the deed on the table, of the family's frozen faces. Those moments were remixable, shareable, memed. Poor village girl buys the mansion and walks in like she owns it. Became she was thrown out, now she owns the throne. The narrative wasn't just about her rise, it was the public catharsis of a wronged woman flipping the script. Bloggers, influencers, and even morning talk show hosts dissected her move. Some praised her restraint, her quiet power, her strategy. Others tried to caricature her as vindictive. The social feeds were a battlefield. But the dominant narrative, fueled by her earlier anonymous op-eds and the controlled release of her vision for legacy restoration, portrayed her as a phoenix who had turned ashes into architecture. Uche's name was dragged in. Headlines questioned his choices. Did he choose his family over his wife? Silence or cowardice? Kyoma's PR damage control only amplified the story. Her earlier confident statements were contrasted against the current unraveling. The family's allies went quiet. The ones who stayed public spun defensively, which only led to more scrutiny. In the aftermath, Nkem did one thing that surprised everyone. She didn't take a victory lap. Instead, she released a short video, not flashy, no dramatic music. She sat in a plain room with soft lighting, dark background, her face calm. She spoke directly. They threw me out with rain on my back and doubt in their eyes. They thought that was the end. It wasn't. I was never an accident in their story. I was the sequel. This mansion isn't about them anymore. It's about who they tried to erase and the women who have been waiting for a chance to be seen. Legacy isn't about space. It's about the lives you elevate when you have the privilege to do so. It was shared millions of times. People saw themselves in her words. Women who'd been dismissed, men who'd been silenced, children who'd been told their voices didn't belong in rooms of power. Online, the #LegacyRestored trended. Opinion pieces poured in about how her calm, strategic ascent contrasted with the family's noisy desperation. She became the narrative pivot, not just about owning a mansion, but about owning the terms of her dignity. The public humiliation of the Uche family wasn't a moment. They'd engineered humiliation for others for years. Now the world watched them sit in cages of their own making. They didn't have to be allowed to be exposed. The silence from their camp, the defensive statements, the shifting alliances, and Nkem's composed rise did the rest. In the middle of the storm, Nkem's notebook had a new section, Phase, Influence. Under it, the first bullet point read, Turn their shame into stories that empower. She began drafting the framework for her real estate brand, a brand with a mission embedded in the clause her grandfather left, helping women who'd been discarded rebuild, not just houses, but futures. The mansion's marble floors no longer echoed only with the memory of humiliation. They now carried the footsteps of purpose. Nkem launched Eichner Homes and Legacy, a real estate brand wrapped in mission. The name borrowed from the ancestral strength her grandfather celebrated. Eichner, the symbolic spirit of achievement and personal destiny. But this was not the typical luxury brand. The first initiative, quietly announced, was Second Chance Residences, a program building and renovating homes for women who had been cast aside, divorced without support, dismissed from inherited wealth, or displaced by family politics. Each property came with mentorship, legal aid, and business training. The press release didn't have the usual ego-laden language. It had stories, real, raw accounts of women who once sat in silence and now had keys. Uche watched from the periphery as the brand grew, not with the empty noise of a trending moment, but the slow, persistent pull of legitimacy. Nkem was no longer just a headline. She was infrastructure. Her brand held events where she spoke about reclaiming space, not to gloat, but to teach. The first beneficiary was a woman from a small town whose in-laws had thrown her out with nothing after a divorce. She stood on stage with Nkem, holding a painted key. Her gratitude was voiced through tears, but the larger audience heard the message. You are not disposable. The empire she built wasn't just about property. It had built-in programs that turned equity into empowerment. She partnered with female lawyers to create title clinics that helped women get legal recognition for lands taken. She established a fund that provided interest-free seed capital for former domestic workers who wanted to start their own housing-related businesses. The same platforms that once mocked her began to feature her. Podcast hosts who had questioned her motives now asked for interviews, trying to understand the calm behind the rise. She handled all of it with the same silent strategy. No oversharing, no sensationalism, just clarity of purpose. Uche's attempts to reappear in media were clumsy. He was invited to speak on loyalty and family values, but the public had started to see the gap between his words and his choices. Nkem's empire was building infrastructure. His was scrambling for relevance. Kyoma's brand spin turned hollow as whistleblowers from their former philanthropic fronts leaked evidence of manipulative past campaigns. The narrative wasn't just that Nkem was succeeding, it was that the system she dismantled had been propped by optics and hidden cruelty. In a closed-door meeting, Mama Uche asked, "How is she doing this? How does she keep growing while we unravel?" Uche didn't answer. He was watching a live stream of Nkem launching a community center named Mama's House, a deliberate nod to the very women who had once been told to stay in their place. The irony cut deep. The day Uche walked into Nkem's office, the building felt like a sacred space she had carved herself. Light spilled through tall windows. The decor was purposeful and warm, not sterile like the old mansion had been, but composed. He stood at the threshold, unannounced, shoulders slumped. She looked up from a document and didn't raise her voice. "You're Eiley." He swallowed. "I didn't come to beg. I came to apologize." She set the pen down slowly. Apologies aren't currencies here. They don't undo choices. They don't erase what you let happen. "I was weak," he said, voice thick. "They broke me. They made me believe that keeping their image meant cutting you out. I thought silence would protect you. I thought staying inside their script was helping. I was wrong. I've lost everything that mattered." Nkem. The name means nothing when it's attached to people who used it to hurt others. "You chose them over me," she replied. "You signed their paper. You watched them throw me out in the rain and did nothing. That isn't weakness. It's surrender." "I want to make it right," he said desperately. "I'll resign from their board. I'll step away. I'll help build what you're building. I'll tell the truth. I can be with you. I can marry you again. I'll do anything." She leaned back. "Anything, except become a character in their redemption drama. You want to be part of my life. Then show consistency. Not because they told you to. Because you chose it when no one is watching. I don't need your regret. I need your action." He pleaded. "Give me a chance. Just one. I'll make it different." She stayed at him. "You had your chance. You spent it on silence. If you want to help the women I'm helping, do it without trying to slip back into my story. Start your own. I'm not interested in rewinding what was broken. I'm interested in building forward." He left, shoulders heavier than when he arrived. Behind him, the legacy he tried to cling to crumbled further, not from her, but from the truth he kept trying to hide. The final family meeting wasn't for reconciliation. It was for accountability, Nkem's version of closure that didn't require theatrics. She summoned them, not at the mansion, but at the primary community center under her brand, where the walls carried names of women who had been given shelter. The family arrived guarded, stiff, some with forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Media was invited, not to sensationalize, but to witness that she had offered transparency before cutting the last functional tether of illusion. "You once asked me to be quiet," Nkem began, standing center stage. I listened. I watched. I built. Now you're watching what silence births when used as strategy instead of submission. Mama Uche opened her mouth to interrupt, but Nkem's voice held a calm authority that didn't allow disruption. You built your empire on the backs of stories you edited. You decided who belonged and who didn't. You broke people quietly, then painted charity over your control. Today, you're here to receive what you wouldn't give, eviction notices, not from land, from influence, from the quietly held inheritance of respect. She slid envelopes across the table, each containing information about properties the family had exploited, evidence of hidden rents, unfulfilled promises, women who had been displaced or manipulated to maintain the family's public image. The notices weren't about revenge, they were about transparency and redirection. She was exposing the structural cracks and offering a choice. Step down from the hidden power. Let those you displaced have their voices amplified. Or keep being the cautionary tale. Kyoma, pale, hissed, you can't do this. This is harassment. I'm doing what should have been done decades ago, Nkem replied. You can keep the title of family if you stop siphoning dignity. Or you can watch the world rewrite what legacy means without you. Uche looked at her, eyes conflicted. He mouthed something that could have been I'm sorry, but his silence remained consistent, too late to integrate meaningfully. The meeting ended not with a dramatic explosion, but with quiet exits, some wounded, some full of grudging respect, some in denial. The audience outside saw a family exposed differently, not through scandal, but clarity. The power of the old guard eroded not simply by public view, but by the internal restructure she forced without needing to destroy them publicly. She had given them a choice to change. Their hesitation was their undoing. By now, Nkem's story had become more than a viral headline, it was a cultural reference. Talk shows debated what it meant to own your story. Universities used her case in business ethics classes. Documentary filmmakers reached out to chroniclers of social justice. Her face appeared beside trending hashtags, but never with the sensationalism of revenge, always with the weight of transformation. She was interviewed on global platforms about legacy restoration. Her TED Talk, titled Asterisk From Cast Out to Carved In, Asterisk was shared in classrooms, community centers, and women's mentorship hubs. In the talk, she said, they threw me out thinking I'd disappear. What they didn't know was that removing a person from their place in a system sometimes gives them the space to build a better one. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back to redefine what belonging feels like when you build it for others. Magazines ran cover stories, the woman who bought the mansion, and the system. There were profiles about her grandfather's foresight, the quiet cunning of her strategic silence, and the scale of the empire that began as a personal reclamation and evolved into a societal pivot. The Uche family watched her ascendingly. Some allies reached out, asking to collaborate, but she kept the cycle tight. Only those who had demonstrated alignment with her values were allowed near the table. She made a conscious point of featuring former critics in her initiatives, giving them a platform to speak not about her, but alongside her, for transformation, not permission. Her name wasn't just sewn into headlines. It was stitched into a movement. Eichner homes and legacy had waiting lists from women in smaller towns. Former housemaids now ran their own community-based micro-real estate projects. The second chance residences were full. Nkem had started publishing a quarterly journal that highlighted success stories, systemic failures, and educational content. Legacy papers, distributed free to villages and urban centers alike. Her rise had become the kind of story that spawned other stories, about women who were tired of being side characters in someone else's script. They whispered her name in markets, in salons, in quiet corners of boardrooms. She did it. Years later, when the dust had settled and the noise had receded into recognition, someone asked Nkem in an intimate interview, "What happened to Uche's family? Did you ever truly forgive them?" She paused, thoughtful. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting," she said. "They tried to make me small. I made myself necessary. If I sought revenge, I would have erased them publicly. Instead, I redirected what could have been bitterness into building something that doesn't collapse when time tests it. The shelter in her village, named Okonkwo House, stood as the symbol of that redirection. It housed women, stored stories, provided skills training, and had a library of the legacy papers. The mansion, now renovated again under her supervision, hosted mentorship summits where former family members occasionally attended, quietly, not seeking approval, but understanding the new code of conduct if they wanted to sit in the same rooms. When asked about her husband's attempt to return, she said, "He had a choice. He chose silence over conversation, family over partnership. I gave space for him to build a different path. He chose not to. I didn't pursue him. That's not cruelty. That's clarity." Her final public statement on the Uche family was a gentle one. "I forgave them, but I never forgot." Their story is now part of a larger narrative about how power can be dismantled without destruction and rebuilt so it carries everyone forward. The last scene shows her at a groundbreaking ceremony, children from the village laughing in the background, women who'd been given homes holding shovels, and in the distance, the old mansion's silhouette glowing with new life. She looks at the crowd, then down at her notebook. The same notebook she'd written in the rain now had the final line, inked neatly. Redirection is the kind of power that doesn't need to crush to create. It simply chooses better. The camera pulls back, and the story closes, not on her enemies, but on the community she rebuilt. The woman who was once thrown out like trash now held the blueprints for legacy in a way that no one could ever take away again. The end.